And we are here. Definitely only counted down to 2 before clicking that button, but here we are, taking Eonlake by surprise. Good day, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to episode 146 of ADSN. Getting in just before the 10 past the hour mark. So you may enter PayPal sleeping smiling areas before anything else. Welcome. We're here. It is NAMM. And we're talking all about the gas in both actions today. We've got a lot of things to get through. We've got lots of seemingly combining things coming together in terms of software. The hardware might have to wait till next week. Sunwarper is running around NAMM as we speak, probably. So Eonlake and I are here this week. And we're going to be looking at what's been going down. So Eonlake, how are you, brother?
I'm good. I'm just chuckling, thinking of Sunwarper running around now, potentially getting himself barred of himself.
Just asking all the questions. You've seen his setup. He put his setup in our group chat. It's like an iPad, and he's using the P6 as an audio interface, which is
very cool, isn't it?
It's very different, right?
And of all the things, looking at that little setup, I thought maybe I've tried recording and sequencing. You're thinking, I've got a DAW on my iPad, I'll just use that. And it just didn't really work out like I planned. So we'll see how he gets on with it.
I wish him all the best.
Yes.
Someone will be thinking about you. I'm gonna bring down here. We got a couple of people in the chat. We have Smiling is back. He says he's gonna be back at 10 past 7, so he might not actually be here because it's only 7 minutes past the hour. But he's here. Sleeping State. Sleeping State is here also. And Little Bro, who is nice to see. Hello, Little Bro. Wonderful to have you all here. Yeah, we're here. This is episode 146, and yeah, we're in our pre-NAMM phase. So we've got a couple of things to be talking about. This week, Eonlake, what have you been up to?
What have I been up to? I've had quite a regular week, really. Just doing little experiments and not getting uptight about music. It's the psychological game this week. It's all been the psychological game, not the music game. It's all been about just... I feel like I'm in a bit of a rut, and it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I'm ignoring that. I'm sticking my fingers in my ears and going, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just practicing a bit of keyboards here. Don't mind me. I'm just playing a bit of drums and just sneakily trying to make inroads into music and hoping that my brain doesn't notice that I'm doing it. I'm trying not to go to the dark place. With some success as well, actually. I think I've had some fun experiments that came out pretty weird. That weird is often good in my book. So
weird is good. The weird is the best in that regard. Weird is definitely the best. Let us know what you've been up to in the chat. I'll come back to in a second. Just while you were talking, Shady Ridge has decided to join us. Hey, Shady. Hey, Josh. It's nice to see you, man. Yeah. And Abby as well. Always nice to see Abby in the chat. Hope you're doing well. Maybe stuck at work, but we'll have to see. So hang on. Tricking your brain into not making music, or just like, don't mind me, I'm just playing piano. Boom, composition. Is that how it kind of works?
It can do. It hasn't been, actually, but the thing is, everything that I've ever read about other people who get a little bit stuck in a rut for a while is that it always ends at some point. It's a temporary thing, and so I believe very strongly, not necessarily in grind culture, but in doing this stuff regularly, that it's part of your life. If you want to squeeze something in and you have limited time, you need to treat things that way, and you need to at least turn up each day and put some effort in. It doesn't have to be effort like weightlifting effort, but I mean turning up and doing something productive, and not getting hung up on the fact if it goes nowhere or produces something that you don't like or not interested in. It's very easy if you're not watching yourself like a hawk to start I don't know, reading too much into the fact you did a session and you didn't really get anything out of it you liked. It wasn't no bangers today, you know. No, like that's the best thing I've ever written. It's just that it really drives me. It annoys me. It's just one of these things that where I annoy myself a lot. I just why am I reading so much into every little thing that happens? You know, it's a distraction. You're not paying attention on what you should be. If you're doing that, you know, reading too much into it.
Well, I think there's
play some music for God's sake.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. It's like there's almost this expectation that if you play the keys or if you hit record, then you have to come out with something right. And there's this, and you know, it's, and we get frustrated by our own almost the expectations that we put upon ourselves in that instance. You know, and
it's when your ambition turns negative as well. You want to do something really good, you know. Yeah, but it takes time. These things happen when they want to happen, and you know, getting really wound up or super invested in every small thing that happens is not really going to help. You need to free yourself from all of that, you know.
I get that. I mean, I think Smiling Arrow is, well, he says he agrees with you in that sense. Writer's block means it's sound design day. Tinkle with noise.
Yep, and I have been doing that. I've been making some silly noises. Some very silly noises. So even if I haven't got anything out of it that I'm going to use per se, I did make myself laugh a few times. And yeah, it was good fun.
Well, let's see that. Wouldn't mind being a fly on the wall at Eonlake Studios and just see what kind of weird noises are coming out there. It's a very ambiguous term. But if I know you, and I know you pretty well, those are some weird noises.
Yeah. But yes, it's very good to try and do something else, be it practice or sound design, as Smiling Arrow said, or anything you can really. Just keep it going, keep it moving.
That's very fair. You keep it going, keep it going. In a similar vein, Shady, getting through the week, busy week with the label Shady Ridge Records, and experimenting with new KST material. Both of those sound very lovely.
That's what you want to hear, isn't it?
That's exactly that's the thing you want to hear. New KST material. Just those words. Everyone's just waiting for that moment when Shady Ridge Records just brings up KST. We're all sitting here waiting, Shady, in your own time. As we've been saying, you can't rush these things, and they come when you come. But we're all sitting there waiting.
Absolutely, yeah, I am for sure.
Very much so. So yeah, as previously stated, it is pre-NAMM. NAMM is happening right now in America. And so yeah, we've found a few bits and bobs and we're going to sit and talk about them. Very software based, ironically. It's a bit of an ironic show because NAMM is known for its hardware. We're talking mainly software, and then we're going to be talking about, hey, maybe we shouldn't, or how do we temper and taper our gear acquisition syndrome and become more disciplined with our work. So yeah, two things on the docket, Native Instruments and Roland. Eonlake, do you have a preference which one you want to start with?
No, you're trying to say have I got a preference between Native Instruments and Roland? No, I would never admit to Roland.
Fair play to you. Let's start with the Roland thing. I think it's a good introduction, I think, because I'll bring this up so we can see, and I'll share the screen. It looks pretty interesting. I'm very keen to see what that goes. This is well, I think it's the Galaxias. That's how I'm pronouncing it. Let me bring it up here so you can see. This is the new, what they're dubbing a super instrument in inverted commas. A very much akin to Native Instruments Complete Control in that sense, where you've got kind of like everything all in one, and it's one interface, as you can see there. And the idea is that you can grab any Roland historical device in software, bring them together, layer them together, and basically have everything within one suite, essentially. And yeah, there's a whole video, it's a 12-minute video, which we're not going to get into now. But obviously, these are the big guns that kind of come out here from the SH1, the Juno 106, Juno 60, Jupiter 8, etc. And essentially, the historical back catalog coming in for Roland itself, for you to have everything all in one. It looks like a bit of an extension of their cloud, Roland Cloud. yeah, interesting things. What do you think, Eonlake?
Well. I like it because it's kind of like it's kind of like having a Roland specific keyboard rig, you know, like a whole bank of synths with its own mixer, sub mixer, so it can go into the rest of the PA. I don't know. It's an interesting move. I like the fact that it consolidates a lot of things, and it's almost like guitar rig for a synth player. But I wonder if people have already got some of these as well. I mean, you mentioned it yourself, you know, the cloud. If you've already got a lot of cloud instruments, does this benefit you much apart from that? I don't know. I'm beginning to wonder. Everybody likes, especially Juno 60 and the Jupiters and so on, and the sounds that they've been known to produce. But I now find myself, it's like every time I see Serum, I think, yeah, but if I do that, I'm going to sound like everybody, aren't I? Which is, you know, an argument I'm beginning to think when I look at, you know, legacy Roland stuff. It's not because there's anything wrong with it, because there isn't. There's some fantastic sounds, but I think that's almost the problem, that they've been used a fair bit. And I think, you know, I'm at a phase where I'm thinking you've got to look further than that, broader. You need more going on than just classic synth sound and, you know, an arpeggio. And yeah, I do wonder if I'm stretching myself by considering such things. And I don't actually have Roland Cloud at the moment, although I have it because that's how you install their software, and it really annoyingly pops up every time I boot my machine. But I don't know. I like it. I like the fact it's got a mixer and everything. If you are going to use software instruments, it's a nice homogeneous product. But then again, do I want something sitting outside my door? And if it does integrate with your door, do I want the overhead of having all of that running? Do you know what I mean?
Like a lot of CPU usage.
Ableton, okay as it is. I can even save layouts of them, and I can use the Ableton mixer to mix them. Do you know what I mean? I'm wondering what's new here.
Well, I think
I like the idea of it, but I think the reality of it is a bit okay. I'm a little bit. I'm not seeing the benefits for me, and if anything, that's one of my drawbacks in this particular situation. Is I tend to think about things from my own point of view too much. I think if you don't have Roland Cloud, this probably looks pretty good. But if you do, adding anything.
Well, I think you've got some. I think you've got some allies in that idea. The Smiling Arrow says, "I do not understand the fascination of old sounds. We've moved on." Quite plain, quite simple. And I know what you mean. You get there's this notion of Roland kind of piggybacking on their history, so to speak, as opposed to investing in new things. Right now, obviously,
they kind of do both, don't they? To be fair, just not in this particular product.
Yeah. And I think, which is fair, and I understand the viewpoint of, you know, if it's the sounds are old in this instance. We've been through them, we've heard them, they're everywhere right now. You know, move on, essentially, in that sense. I understand that perspective, and from an independent musician exploring music for their own ideas, then yeah, I completely get that. One sticking point I have with that is, again, targeted marketing and who's going to be buying that, right? So yes, if you're an independent musician making your own stuff, go and explore, find the sounds. You know, there's plenty of what was that? There's the Mercury 6 or the Mercury 8 from Cherry Audio, for example. Fantastic Juno emulator in that sense. There's loads of them out there, and you don't have to go to the Roland stuff before, right? You don't have to do that. If you are at the same time making commissioned work and you just know that you want to slap something on, you've got a small deadline and you've got to get it in, this could be something for you in that sense. It's when you're composing for a client, or when you're making something for someone else, sometimes you just want to it's about minimizing the time to get the payment so you can go back to making your own sounds. Now, if I was commissioned to make a synthwave thing, I'd go get the Juno 60 in there, and I would roll it through and be done. Call it done in an afternoon.
Yeah. It's what you need, right? It's the right tool for the job.
Yeah.
And even looking at the other side of it, I mean, you should be aware every decision that you make like that has a cost, right? There's always a flip side, and always pushing for something to be new can mean that you're just doing something just because it's new, not because it actually sounds good or is the right choice or anything really. So, it's all very well to try and push yourself in new directions, but sometimes it's what you need, right? Sometimes the old tried and tested lovely sounds can work.
Well, I couldn't agree more. I think I was listening to
the right direction, don't you? Sorry.
Well, exactly. No, sorry. I was listening to Abacus had a new EP out today called Clouds, I think it is.
Okay.
And it's awesome. It's really cool and it's really nice. There's some singing in there, and it's a whole thing, right? And in there, it's very electronic and it's very bass music heavy. So it's quite heavy, thick sounds, and it's very bright. And the percussion is again very heavy in that sense. And there's the progression of the music itself comes through, and you can just hear a classic kind of 808 percussion sound, just a kind of sound, and it's very minimal, and it's very identifiable straight away. You know it. I know what that is, And in that sense, it is also the perfect tool for the job, because it's coming towards the end of the track, and it's just hitting that 16th pocket, and it doesn't need to do anything else, and it's only about filling that pocket. It's not about making a statement, but it's just there, and you'd notice if it wasn't there. And in that sense, some of those sounds are classic, and some of those sounds are timeless in that regard. And that has to be given the credit where credit's due.
Yeah, and I think if you have all these heritage instruments underneath your banner, it makes sense to always have them available in some way. And this product seems all about hyper availability and convenience. I do wonder what if there's any additional overhead involved in having it packaged that way, rather than just a plug-in per voice, per synth that it's emulating. Are you taking it for any of that additional stuff that maybe you'd just rather have a plug-in in your native in your DAW to try and keep the CPU down a bit? But could be a groundless concern. I'd have to test it.
You'd have to test it. I mean, maybe you've ridden onto something there. Maybe that they're buying into, or they're cashing in on buyers' anxiety, so to speak. One package fits all. Don't worry about it. We got the sounds.
Yeah. And
so they have to cash in.
If you're not selling, I mean, it also makes sense if you make hardware and you make software. You want to make sure that both are freely available, so that if either sales take a hit, the other one can make up for it. There was a real analog, revival for a few years. People are getting a little bit more choosy now and realizing that even adding one digital oscillator gives you a lot more flexibility in sound and so on. So that's maybe, come to an end. You've got to find another way to keep things going.
So we've got to keep milking that horse. While you've been talking, all right, we've got a bit of chat coming in. First and foremost, coming from the bottom, still Ed, Thomas is with us, patron Thomas. Hey, Thomas, hope you are doing well, man. Congrats on the Days release. That is a beautiful little EP. That's been singing me to sleep for the last week or so. It's beautiful. Yeah, that's really nice. We also have ASF Stripe, who's just said, sounds are just sounds. I say don't allow its prior use to influence your vision. It's a very interesting one. And before I want to just say onto that, but again, smiling errors. The Weeknd has a lot to answer for with these old synths being churned out. Fair, I think. I mean,
to read that a couple of times. The older band, right? Yeah. Sorry, I was being really thick.
Yeah. I want to come back to what ASF Stripe said, because it's very interesting as well. It's this notion of sounds are just sounds. I say don't allow its prior use to influence your vision. I think that's fair, and I think in much agreement in that regard. There is, at the same time, there is a difference to be struck between the influence and being inspired by it. If you are particularly with a genre of music which uses a specific type of sound and you want to be a part of that, then that's a different matter, I suppose, in that regard.
Yeah. I mean, you can look at this a lot of different ways. Sometimes you can throw things out just because they're a bit cliche and end up weakening what you've done. I'm thinking of a particular album, a band I won't name, but from years ago when I was listening to kind of psychedelic electronic music, and they did an album where it almost was like somebody said no 808 or 909 kicks or anything like that, and it was all alternative drum sounds, and it just killed the album for me.
Really?
Yeah, not because I desperately needed to hear them, but just the ones that were there just didn't do it. They really didn't. And I, you know, for all the years afterwards, I could never really get into it. The whole album, it was a real, very interesting to me, and it's still stuck with me now. That yeah, okay, I don't necessarily want to thrash a sound that is used to death by everybody else, but at the same time, you know, it's got to do what it needs to do, irrespective of, you know, where you got it and how many other people used it.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I think that as much as we can't close ourselves off the sounds in that regard, you know, we can't close ourselves off to something just because it's been done before. So yeah, that's a very interesting point in that regard. Smiling Eris wants to know if it was a Devon band.
No, it wasn't.
Maybe I'm really curious because I want to know what this band is. But maybe if you put it on the Discord, put it on the Discord so we can kind of see where this is at. I understand not when to broadcast it, but yeah. Like to see. Maybe you can add it. I've got for history's sake, Eonlake lovingly compiled 5 gigabytes of psytrance and Goa trance for me over the last couple of weeks, and I've just been in that hole, and now I just want more. So if you're if there's more music history, if there's an album that's been ruined specifically because it didn't use certain sounds, I want to know what this is, to be fair.
I don't think it's on Spotify, I'll tell you that. I'm not sure if they're still around either. Probably not.
Well, okay, all right, we'll have to see. If you want to see, potentially head down into the descriptions and join up at the Discord. That'd be really fun to see. It might be there, it might not. We'll have to wait and see if Eonlake is being kind or not. Anything else on the Galaxias before I head across the native instruments, Eonlake?
No. I wonder though if there's a hardware variant that can work with it as well.
What, like a box that does it, like a controller, or a box that has those sounds in?
Yeah, maybe a knob per function. You know, I don't know how you do it. You know, because some knobs would have to change function depending on what synth you've got loaded in and so on. But you know, the bigger synths have got these, they've got the plug-in voices that you can add, and you can go, right, here's a Jupiter 8, I'll plug it in. I've got that as well. So, I mean, I don't know. There seems to be a crossover of what's happening in software and what's happening in the real world.
Well, a singularity almost. That'd be quite fun. We'll have to see. One last thing, just I just want to get in on this. Thomas Stillhead says he wants to have a drum sampler for his modular. That could be quite fun. I want to get one of those little. Thomas has got one of these little mini modules that sits on the desk. It's just kind of there, and I kind of want that. I don't want a big wall of modular. I wouldn't mind just a little carry around box of modular. I think that'd be quite fun. I know that's a slippery slope.
just a little skiff, you know, just a few HB. Yeah,
a little few
get
things.
longer and longer.
Just before you know it, just everywhere. We'll have to see. Not in my lifetime. Not unless we do things. Anyway, heading across. I don't have a thing for this, so maybe I should just bring this up. I'll bring up their press release. I'll bring up the press release actually, because that's an interesting one. This is quite interesting, and this comes officially as part of Native Instruments' piece from NAMM. Is that Native Instruments is expanding its partnership to allow other company controllers to access their native control standard software, or the NKS as it's commonly known. This means that brands like AKAI, Novation, Kh3rtis, Korg, and M Audio can integrate their controllers with NKS software, bringing their plugins essentially to these ideas. Obviously, you've always been able to use the plugins that are in Complete Control or part of Native Instruments as a MIDI keyboard, but we're talking here about parameters, MIDI mapping, etc. It's going to be fully integrated. This means that over 2,000 instruments and effects from over 250 brands will be now available for other companies such as, like I say, Novation and Korg. And the idea is this is a continuing and ever evolving collaboration. So right now, the software that's coming in will be able to be MIDI mapped, for example, so you can do that. But the idea is that there will be in the future MIDI controllers and pieces of hardware which are more fully integrated with Native Instruments from other brands to allow further integration with their stuff. This looks quite exciting as well. I got to say, and I'll throw it over to you in a second, Eonlake, this notion of, again, this is another all-in-one box, which seems to be where the market is going, right? So we, again, like you say, we had a hardware resurgence, and we're kind of coming back into this world of software as, you know, as people's pockets are thinner, so to speak. But this, again, is a really interesting one. Native Instruments have some really, really high quality plugins, and some really not just ones that you pay for, because obviously you're paying for Native Instruments is quite a lot. One package bundle, 500 euros or so at best. I think it could actually be close to 1,000. But then to have everything that you've got, which is non-Native Instruments, be able to control that stuff as they are, that's pretty cool. I think that's quite nice. I'm a big fan of Native Instruments and what they do, and their quality, especially when it comes to cinematic and, again, for commissioned stuff. That excites me a lot in that sense.
Yeah, in my head, they got into that sample-based unique instrument sort of niche quite early on, and a bit like, you know, you see quite a lot of these tools now that are geared towards a certain area of music making, like, you know, sound tracking and atmospheres and, you know, sound effects, but created by real orchestras and so on, as opposed to like electronically produced sounds. And there's some very clever instruments, and often they're sample based and using technology like this. And it's funny, each time I look at Native Instruments, I wonder why I don't use it more. To be fair, I did have a few instruments back in the day that used the contact player that I quite liked, and I quite liked the interface. But it's never something I really adopted in a big way. And I couldn't give you a reason why not either, particularly, because on the surface of it, I kind of like it. But this sounds very much like, you know, putting the power into people's hands, as far as, you know, being able to have specific controllers for it, and, you know, not just be set in front of a screen. And that's good. It is good. Part of me wonders how much configuration is going to be needed and how much things can work out of the box, hopefully, because of this because of this step forward, there won't be as much needing to create your own templates and configure your own bits and bobs, that it will work more easily with factory settings so that you can get on with the fun stuff rather than messing around for hours making things work. Like in the bad old days of just MIDI mapping controls and things like that. So I don't know. It sounds like good news to me. I don't know that I'm going to make huge use of it myself because I still haven't adopted native instruments in any large way. And I think, like you were saying, it was probably a money thing. Really.
I'm curious now how much complete control is. Keep talking for a sec. Finish that thought.
I've been through this cycle a few times where I've looked at it and thought, it's not going to be that much, is it?
Oh, and yeah, it is.
It is, yeah.
I'm trying to see.
That's why I haven't got it. And, you know, it's just other things have come along. But this is going to do a lot to make things more attractive, I think. But even so, if it's going to be priced down, I won't be doing any cartwheels.
Well, this is it. I think Smiling Errors has the right idea. Only buy it when it's on sale. He does, because he's in agreement. It's native instrument foundations
before as well to do that as well. Just wait for the sale.
Just wait for the sale. Which makes sense because I mean, as much as they are high quality, as Smiling Errors says, it is pricey, and it is kind of like it's an investment, right? It's when you start thinking about doing things professionally or doing things full time, that kind of thing. You've got the Select 15 for €100, the standard for 600 euro, the full version, the ultimate, which is not even the biggest one, is €1,200 basically, but the full version, the collector's edition, is €1,799, basically €1,800. Now, on the face of that, that's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. And that is a lot of it's a lot of hard drive space, right? Which is something you've always got to bear in mind. They're high quality samples. A lot of complete control are in the tens of gigs. I think they're one thing that stops me downloading their emotive strings is it's about 30 gigabytes of samples in there. So that's a lot. So you've got to have a big hard drive and you've got to have a powerful computer in order to get it run. Where was I going with this? What was I saying? But it's in the same way, like, okay, so €1,800. Again, that's a single piece of hardware, right? It's a single piece of that could be a single synthesizer or a couple of synthesizers in that regard. And you wouldn't in theory, you wouldn't need anything else. If you learned complete control, if you learned NKS from inside out, I don't think you would need anything else. And it does seem to be like beat makers and people who are mainly in the box, it does serve them really well in that regard. In a similar fashion to you, I have it and I use it. I do use it. I don't use it probably as much as I potentially could, but that's just because I've got other stuff to be exploring, and I'll get there. It's on the list, you know. But it does seem like a good shout in that sense. You are muted, by the way. You are still muted. Hang on. Maybe if I unmute you. Can I unmute you?
That was me. I was coughing.
There you go. Sorry, bro. I just forced you to speak.
Yeah,
Carry on.
I was just thinking reliable from a quality point of view, though, especially if, again, you know, you're not writing for yourself, it's work, and you're doing something for a particular type of genre or something. If you're doing sync music or something, and you just need quality, varied sounds, and so on. Yeah.
It makes sense. Mike brings up an interesting point. There's native instruments plugins, but it's worth checking whether third-party contact plugins are included as playable instruments. It's a very good point, or whether they would need mapping themselves. You can put third parties in there, but obviously they're not mapped right now. Be interesting to see if they can carry on going. And Smanios again hitting the nail on the head. Composition great, for sound design less so, which again is fair. It's very much a kind of a native instruments is very much choose this preset, slap it on, get the MIDI right.
Yeah, which is great for people who are not interested in sound design and really just want to get on with it.
Yeah.
Because, it is something I enjoy doing, but I can understand that, messing around, trying to find something inspiring and maybe not getting there. It's not something you want to introduce to a session. And that's why I don't do it as part of writing. But yeah, I can understand anyone who just says, get me something that sounds good and I'll take it from there. Thanks.
Completely. If it's good enough for Fortet, it's good enough for me. That's what I kind of say in that regard.
Yeah, I often think of things that way.
And as a little side note, I just want to bring up something that Stillhead says, this notion of not that, well, he does. I wanted to, he agrees with smiling areas, but I wanted to click on this one. I almost only use third-party instruments. Now, I would love to potentially do a round robin about this at some point in the next couple of weeks. This notion of third-party plugins versus stock plugins. And obviously, there's no right or wrong. And obviously, there's pluses and cons for both, and I know that we were discussing this during Starstream on Sunday, our Patreon hangout, where Mike was taking us through the setup he was using, or he's going to be using for his gig in a couple of weeks' time. And he's using stock because of CPU and stuff like that. I would love to get through it. I've gone through a bit of an arc recently of going purely third party and purely things like contacts and stuff like that. And then coming back to just using things in Ableton, and now it's kind of rebalancing, and I'd love for us to have a discussion about that.
I've swung madly from one to the other a number of times, and I'm now, there's still some things that I'm not going to go all the way into it now, but there's still some things that I always do natively, and it's usually things like channel strip effects and things like that, and just sonic control. I find using an external compressor and stuff like that can introduce an overhead that doesn't really extend well to like 30, 40, 50 channels of sound. But at the same time, there are some third-party plugins that do crazy stuff that you'd have to have quite a mad long effects chain if it even was possible to do that, and it probably isn't. And I just flatten them to samples if it gets too much.
That's fair. Let's park that one, because that risks running a tangent, and I think it deserves its own segment. We've got some other things to discuss today.
And I know Sunwarper's got opinions on that one.
Yeah, he does. He does have opinions. So maybe we wait for him to come back from running around NAMM with his P6. Because yes, there is obviously a space for both. There are third-party libraries. There are third-party plugins. There's also the stock stuff. And yes, Mike, I would consider Max for Live stock.
Yeah, especially now it's bundled.
Yeah, I'd say so. I think you're fair there. Speaking of which, we have got a load of chat from the likes of Mike Smith and Stillhead and Shady Ridge. And these guys tune in each week. And thank you ever so much for doing that. We love it. And we really loved hanging out with you on Sunday for the Star Stream. Not only are these guys regulars, everybody, but they're also our patrons. And we don't have sponsorships here. We don't make any money from ads or anything like that. The lights are kept on by these people and a group of patrons. And we really appreciate you. Thank you ever so much. We do this week in and week out. We grow every year. One of our guys is at NAMM this year, and that's pretty cool and that's pretty fun. So thank you ever so much. If you are listening to this show and you like what you do, like what we do, sorry. I mean, I'm sure you like what you do. I hope you like what you do. But if you like what we do, consider heading across to patreon.com/audionautic, make a pledge. Pledges start at $2 a month. And for that, there's a lot of extra stuff that goes on behind the scenes. There's free sample packs, for example, Starstream hangout every month, which we just did on Sunday, where we just sit and chat and move around and talk about stuff. Everything considered when it comes to music production. So yeah, any more to say on that, Eonlake?
No, just to reiterate the thanks.
Yeah, thank you. We really appreciate it. I love doing this. Eonlake and I were having a chat. We've had some difficult days, and we get some difficult days sometimes. But then all that goes out the window, and we just sit down with you guys and have a chat about music. It's great fun.
Yeah, sanity maintenance.
Sanity maintenance. I'm going to put that on a T-shirt. Audionautic sanity maintenance. That'd be fun. Anyway, moving on upwards. We've got about 15 minutes left, and I want to make it slightly ironic because, you know, why not? Before I get onto it, hang on. No apologies necessary, Thomas. Things happen, man. There's one next month. We have to put it in the diary. Probably the last Sunday of the month. It is nice to have you around and nice to see your face. So, yeah, I want to bring this back ironically. This is just something that I've been ticking over for the last couple of weeks. Now, forgive me if I start rambling. So, Eonlake, feel free to stop me. But I just want to kind of set the scene a little bit. He says to the rambler,
Trying to hold up. You're rambling.
Basically since November, really, I have not been making much music. I've been tinkering. I have been recabling. I've been rewiring, and I have been resetting everything together, right? And then I started making music again in that wibbly wobbly bit between Christmas and New Year. And then I bought the Tascam 12. And you know what I did? I chucked it all out and I started all over again. And I'm tinkering and I'm tinkering and I'm tinkering, and seemingly endless amounts of tinkering. Now, at what point do you, within this tinkering, I'm thinking, oh, if I just had this piece of gear, or if I had the P6, or if I had that, or if I had this, or if I had that, you know, this would make what I'm trying to create, and it would fulfill the vision in which I have in my head, which is to make live psytrance. So, at what point, Eonlake, do we have to just stop, take a breath, and go, I got enough. I just need to stop, and I just need to chill, and I just need to work with what I've got and learn about what I've got.
Well, in all fairness, probably at least a year ago. But yeah, how much of it is gas? How much of it is, you know, how you expect yourself to work, or how you want to work versus what's really going to work for you? It's a hard one to answer, really. I don't like making huge changes to what I have. When I'm sort of collecting bits of hardware to use with the software that I use to make the music that I do, it was all very deliberate. Each thing was added for a reason, because it does something the rest of the stuff doesn't do. And that did kind of peter out after a while, the need for something else that did something that I didn't already have. But as Asef Stripes just said in the chat, well, he says he makes too many changes. I'm wary of doing that, because I'm also aware, and I think I've said this to you in the past, Kh3rtis, that I made life difficult for myself by doing too much of that at once. And too much equipment that you don't know how to use, or software, it can be with software as well, just keeps you from doing what it is you're supposed to be doing in the first place. So I think the best way to approach it is a practical way of trying to actually do it. When you hit a limitation, work around that limitation, but only as long as you need to, in order to keep moving towards your goal. Because I think it'd be very nice to think, oh, I could have all of this and so on. But I think if you've got a gig to play, you suddenly start getting very real about how much of this stuff you really need, especially when you've got to cart it there yourself and set it all up pretty quick, where, you know, you don't have a lot of time, maybe no sound check either. So it is just literally wang it on a table, patch it all up, switch it on, make sure it all happens. And yeah, giving Mike so much ammo in the chat here, but but it is true. You know, I think you need And the thing that I found myself coming back to is nowhere, in no form factor, do you get so much function and so many of the things that you need in order to play live in such a small space with less cables and power requirements than just a laptop.
Mm.
And I know it's not popular because this whole come and see my laptop live. So obviously, you know, you need to work around that. But even if you're not, I mean, the implication there is they're talking about sequencing live sets and not actually doing anything. And I get that, right? But, you know, any DAW these days is a really good mixer, really good effects, and the ability to chain them and all the rest of it, CPU permitting. The amount that it can do in a tiny little flat thing, you know, like that, it's kind of crazy not to have it on stage, even if you're not sequencing anything. Do you know what I mean? I mean, what's her name? There's a modular artist I love to listen to, Kh3rtis Barbieri.
Okay.
She plays live with modular a lot, and she has often used a laptop to process the inputs and put effects on it. She's not sequencing anything. She's just using it like an effects box and a mixer. And, you know, why not? So, I don't know. I think book a gig. And if you're not going to book a gig, say at a certain date, you're going to play a set and record it and put it out, or even do it live, however you prefer, and actually do it. And let it tell you rather than you tell it how much of the stuff you need. Because I started looking around the things I've got, and I thought, okay, some of this is actually really useful. The 404 is useful because it can act as a sound card, and I can mangle. It's got effects on it, hooray, and an input. The push is great because there's a lot of control in one place, and I don't want to touch a laptop on stage. And the microfiche is brilliant because it's a really flexible synthesizer, so I can play it.
It's tiny,
but it's tiny. Yeah. So there are a few things, and I've got a couple of Allen and Heath mixers, MIDI mixers, zone ones that came in very handy when I needed some extra stuff that I didn't want to do on the push, but needed to be out of control. So, but very soon it got to the point where, okay, this is already getting a bit bigger than I planned, and I don't want to add anything else. So I think start with something in mind that you're working towards, and if it's not a real gig, then make it as real in your head as you can, and work towards it and see what you can do, and set yourself some rules. Say anything that goes in front of you there, bearing in mind you're carrying it and it's going to get knocked around and all the rest of it, you know, it needs to justify its place there.
It does. It needs to justify its place. And I just in a similar fact, where is it? Here we go. ASAP Stripe. I walk around the studio and ask each piece, why are you here again? It's a very good way of putting it. I like that. You know, having a sense of sorry.
Let them interview for their job again.
Yeah. So it's time for your annual appraisal. What have you brought to the company this year? Exactly. Like it's, and I understand that there is at the same time, again, a very interesting thing again from Stillhead. I use about 10% of my hardware. However, 10% sparks to so many unique sounds and ideas, which again is very fair. Like this. Okay. Yeah. So the monologue is now, 2 weeks ago, before I got the Tascam, it was part of the setup, and it was both being used as the audio, and it was also being used as a MIDI controller. Now it's sitting as part of the auxiliary extra thing, which might be used if I need a specific sound, but it's not part of the setup anymore, right? But I was playing around the other night, and the flute patch on here is sublime. It's really nice. It's really mellow, and it's beautiful, and it's a little bit gritty, and it's a little bit crunchy. And you could get, you know, you could build a patch in Ableton using Drift or whatever, Mike. You know, there you go. but it's just there. And there's a certain thing about taking and playing with the cutoff and that, which is just there, you know. So that both are very strong arguments.
Yeah, and if the monologue's anything like the mini-log, I know what you mean. It's very immediate. You can get to things that you want very quickly because it's familiar and it's knob per function, and you know, it's just very immediate, hands-on stuff. So I kind of think, well, that's good. It's good to have that stuff, but I'm not going to take it. I'm not going to take it, you know, to go and play a gig with me because it's just too much stuff. So I'll just, you know, sample the bits I recorded that part of the song and just fly them in from there. And that way, you know, a small sampler that's got a big flashcard in it saves you a lot of room on the table.
It's a fair point. And as Mike Smith says, if you love hardware for only one sound, sample it and sell it. Seems fine enough for my millennial brain, but I hear where you're coming from.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, the thing is, there's a space argument. The limit, it's less of a limit at home, perhaps, than it is on stage, but it's always going to be a consideration, isn't it? And all of this stuff, unless you've sorted your power out very nicely and you only switch on what it is you're using. I mean, it's like energy is getting more and more expensive. You don't necessarily want to have millions of things all switched on all the time. It's crazy.
True. It's true. That can also create that paralysis of analysis in that same rate. Again, Smiling Errors, he says, my biggest hump to overcome was finding a core of instruments that I enjoyed the sounds enough not to spend days searching for that sound. Now it's more about writing, which at the end of the day is the main thing. You know, if you've got a wall of synthesizers and if you've got an entire workshop at your fingertips, at some point there is a case of, well, where do you start and where are you going from? Now, obviously you can put limitations on yourself and overcome that, but at the end of the day, you want to, I suppose that comes into that notion of spreading out your knowledge or having a deeper knowledge of less things.
Yeah, and sometimes you want to do things differently. It's funny that the three of us have all decided to have a little, you know, set up on the side. Just to noodle around with stuff and different little, you know, just a few devices for experimental purposes that seem to have drifted away from the rest of the studio setup. I think and it's deliberate for me. I don't want to mess with my normal workflow and where everything is. I don't want to upend my studio every few days just to try and explore something new. I think it's good to have an experimentation area dedicated for that and maybe shift things in and out of it in a considered way rather than just going, do you know what, I'm just going to pull all the cables out and start again. The idea of that, doing that horrifies me in this room, the amount of cables going all over the place. I really, really don't want to do it. So it's all controlled. You know, there's a little experimentation bit over there that changes, but the rest of it kind of stays relatively static.
Which is it's a good way of thinking about it as well. I think there is coming back to the tinkering side of it, in the name of like the cable management, in that sense, I have developed a love of cabling, right? I'm a techie, right? Everything I do is to do with techie and rolling cables and plugging things in and doing stuff out. And I enjoy the art of making it neat and tidy, especially for a gig or a concert or something like that, you know. So when I come home, a part of me kind of enjoys that unwinding process of rolling cables, you know. Not sure why, maybe I just hate myself, but the notion of doing it is quite soothing, but it's also a distraction from actually making music. And in the same way that we distract ourselves from difficult feelings or difficult experiences, you know, we can distract ourselves from actually finishing an album or finishing a track or whatever it is, not finishing what we're working on by going, oh, let's just try that, just try this, try that, try this, try that. You know, at some point you just gotta go, no, I'm done. You know, gotta get right.
I'm the kind of person that will fall into the traps that you're talking about there, and for that reason, for me, I think the experimentation is heavier towards the front and sort of tapers out more towards the end, where you need to just, as Mike Smith says, get on with it. After a while, it's like, okay, yeah, I've generated as much variety as I can. I am now, messing about instead of getting on with it. And for that reason, I like to front load it as much as possible.
Yeah, I get that. Chris doesn't seem to have the problems that we do. My cable management in Studio B, USB cable from phone to Kh3rtis plus headphones, done. That seems pretty simple, and that seems pretty streamlined to me. That's about as streamlined as you can get. It doesn't make
any demands of you when you got something like that, does it? It's nice and it's just fun then. Just a pair of headphones and a KO.
Yeah, it's all you need. It's all you need. But yes, it comes down to procrastination at the end of the day. I think, we get into writing. It's similar to what you were saying. We get ourselves into writing ruts, and we wonder what's it all about, and then we kind of struggle to put our proverbial pen to paper and come up with something in that sense. And therefore we end up procrastinating. Maybe that's me. Maybe I'm projecting there. But I am guilty of that. I am guilty.
You're alone, mate.
Just maybe
I'm definitely there with you.
Just like, if I just that cable's looking a little bit frayed. That looks like I need something different there. I don't like the way that's hanging. Maybe I should coil that. I have to rip everything out. Like, yeah, it becomes a cycle, and it becomes a way of, I'm working on something. I'm an artista, darling, but I haven't actually done anything in that regard. So I can understand.
That's approaching intervention territory there, I think.
We'll have to see. It's good to check in that regard, and good to check in with ourselves about why we're being intentional with what we're doing, right? It's nothing wrong with having a wall of synthesizers, and there's nothing wrong with hanging on to a piece of gear, for example, because it has a couple of patches that are close to your heart. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's, where are you putting your time and energy? A lot of us feel like we don't have enough time to be creative. What are we doing with our time, I suppose, is the question that comes there.
Yeah.
Easy
to track if you actually chop it up as well. If you do your different tasks separately and don't mix writing with other things, then it can, if you actually track that time usage, it's easier to see how you have spent your time. If you're doing 5-hour cabling sessions and 30-minute writing sessions that don't go well,
okay, I'm gonna play. I hear you. And just while you were thinking, I've got a devil's advocate, if I may. All right,
please do.
In the December, so for me, December was tinkering time, right? Like I say, I was just recabling everything, and everything kind of changed, right? And in that process of sometimes 4 hours, 5 hours of just working and dusting and cabling, etc., I had new ideas about setups that I wouldn't have had if they stayed where they are. So while there is obviously on the one hand the procrastination, and there is the movement of putting off the actual getting to the writing, getting down, or getting on with it, as Mike would say, there is this other sense of the physical cabling, patching, whatever you want to call it, or however you want to tackle it, is also a way to kind of meditate on what could be and what could be there. Does that make sense? Am I getting that? Am I hearing that?
Yeah. I suppose it sounds a little bit like a spring clean, though, in a way. I mean, if you're doing that once a month, that's for my mind, that's a bit weird. That's obsessive. If you're doing that once a year, and at the same time, if you're still writing music, if you still have an output, and you're not significantly torpedoing that, then there's no reason not to do it, right? And it might give you other things to try and things to explore. I think you know instinctively when you're just wasting time. And that doesn't sound like you necessarily have been. But I think if you were, you'd kind of know it in a way as well. Because I don't know about you, but I'd start to get that grotty sort of guilty feeling of like, I'm not really doing anything here, am I? Where's the music?
I mean, I have that, and I
Where
run
is
a
it?
podcast.
Imagine like music is your rent, right? And somebody's going to come in and collect it. Where is it?
Where's that track? Yeah, it's fair. It's fair. It's worth it's worth meditating on it. How much are we procrastinating, and how much are we heading towards the quote unquote the perfect setup when the perfect setup doesn't exist? And it's just it's worth us kind of being intentional with what we're doing when the small time that we have in the studio, so that we can be happy. It's important not to beat ourselves up over it, though. Again, coming back to what you were saying about kind of not writing a banger today, that kind of situation. I think you're instinctively going to fall into that because sometimes that's what you need to do. It's important that you don't beat yourself up for it.
Let yourself take a day off writing bangers.
Just a cable. Mike, on the other hand, Mike is very much no. Just get on with it. There's no question about it
as well. I mean, yeah, that's the thing. It's so often just about turning up and doing it regularly, irrespective of what's going on. Like we were talking about at the beginning. Even if it doesn't come out with the world-changing song that you hoped it would, just do it anyway and try and still have fun doing it. Because I don't know, if you have a miserable process writing music, I'm pretty sure you're going to come out, you're going to hear that in the finished result. Oh, this was a real chore, this one.
It's true. Yeah. And I think that's another topic. Again, it's a topic for another round robin, that notion of negating or one's own expectations before writing. There's no such thing. I don't know. I keep coming back to this notion. There's no such thing as good or bad. There just is. And just because something is not a banger in the sense doesn't mean it's not a valid piece of work. And I think the expectation that everything you write has to be a banger is a whole other thing. But hey, potentially that's a sidetrack, and we should talk about that another time.
Yeah. I think Mike summed it up though, that the trick to writing good music, in case anyone missed it, there it is.
The trick to writing good stuff is to write a metric ton of stuff that's just SHITE.
And not be put off by that. You just keep on trucking.
And as Thomas says, have fun. We're meant to play music. It's meant to be playful. So yeah, we'll have to see where that goes. We'll leave that there for now because we're getting on for 10 past the hour. And yeah, we could go in circles. We can continue this discussion in the Discord. I'd love to hear more thoughts. The chat has been alive in this particular round robin and throughout the whole show. So we'd like to know where you're sitting with this, where you're thinking, whether you're watching back or you've been watching and lurking. If you've got any thoughts about your process, how you approach procrastination, how you approach being intentional with your studio time, we'd love to know if you have any insight into it.
Yeah, and as Chris had said, the last one, if your studio's all tidy and so on, you're probably not making music. Yeah. I've got a fridge magnet downstairs that says a clean house is a sign of a wasted life. That's it's a bit like that.
I love that. That's true. It's true.
Get on with it.
Yeah. Maybe I don't need to hoover this weekend. Maybe that's what needs to happen. So we'll see. As we get onto the tail end of this show, Eonlake, what does the week have in store for you, sir?
Some more of the same. I'll tell you what I won't be doing. I'm not planning on any recabling or rejigging this week. No, I'm going to be doing the usual stuff, working through my ideas, listening. I'm at the moment now where I've got a lot of material written that I need to now start grading in the spirit of what Mike was talking about, producing lots of stuff. And the only downside to that is you do have to sort of review and grade and make notes and organize. And I've kind of hit that point again now. I go through cycles of generating stuff and then assessing it and figuring out if I'm going to use it or not, or just carrying on again for another round.
That's fair. That seems like a very healthy way of doing it.
We'll see. We're sort of putting in all that.
We'll have to see. Well, that sounds. Say that again.
How about you? You keep getting away from actually answering these questions because you're doing all the asking. But what are you up to this week?
I think. What am I going to do? I am going to return to the album. I haven't been mixing for about a week and a half, so I want to do a bit of mixing. I think, which would be nice. I love mixing, and I think one thing that I haven't done since I rejigged everything after buying the Tascam is fully set up my pedal board and just sit down and just play some guitar. One of my things this year is, and we have discussed this, is just to play and not necessarily record and not necessarily think about writing a song. I just want to practice playing the guitar and being better at the guitar. So I'm just going to sit cross-legged on the floor with the cats and just play the guitar.
And it's probably a good idea to do that before any studio time as well, just because of, getting to use a different part of your brain.
It's like a warm-up. Yeah,
exactly.
You go for a run before you lift the weights or something like that.
I don't know. I'd ask a healthy person. That's another podcast, mate.
That's a whole other thing. Anyway, we'll leave it there.
Out by next week.
Well, on that bombshell, we'll love you and leave you for now. Thank you ever so much for coming and spending your time with us. The world is a busy place and there's a lot going on, and it's wonderful that you guys have decided and chosen to spend your hour with us on this Wednesday. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you ever so much. I really appreciate it. Eonlake?
Keep it tidy, but keep it going as well.
Keep it tidy, but keep it going. We'll be back next week. I'll probably have some more stuff to talk about, probably from NAMM, a little bit more, a little bit of conversation. It's been lovely. Thank you ever so much for being here. I really appreciate it. We'll see you next week. And I'm going to play the video now. All right. Ciao, ciao.